All right, we're just reiterating our 4 plexuses in the body: cervical plexus, brachial plexus, lumbar plexus, and sacral plexus. Nerves that are going to arise that we see here from each plexus is what we need to go through now. I'm going to start with the cervical plexus because it's just some cervical spinal nerves or ventral rami which become the cervical plexus. And then you see a lot of the nerves are just cutaneous nerves, meaning these nerves supply the skin kind of around the neck area. But there's one main nerve that comes out of the cervical plexus, and that's called, what you should know, is the phrenic nerve. Phrenic nerve will leave the neck area, go all the way down to your diaphragm, which you know is your primary breathing muscle. And the phrenic nerve controls that muscle. So there you have our one major nerve that comes out of the cervical plexus that we should know is the phrenic nerve. Here's just a picture of it. There's your cervical plexus, and what's labeled right there, which we can only see a little bit of it, from the cervical plexus comes this phrenic nerve, the major nerve out of all of these. Cervical plexus nerves that we should know. Don't need to know all of these nerves. A lot of them are just cutaneous nerves, but there's the phrenic nerve coming from the cervical plexus. It's going to go all the way down to the diaphragm muscle. Brachial plexus, brachial means arm, comes from the base of the neck, from C5 all the way down to T1. Those spinal nerves or ventral rami intertwine to form the brachial plexus. They really intertwine. They're made up of roots and trunks and divisions and cords, but you don't need to worry about that. Let's learn the nerves that arise, at least the major nerves that arise from the brachial plexus. This is a good picture that has a lot of labels that you don't need. There's your brachial plexus, and then why is it called brachial plexus? Brachial means arm. That if we follow the nerves that arise from the brachial plexus, we can see that they kind of supply the underarm and the entire arm region. They'll move down the arm all the way down to the tips of your fingers. So these are the 5 major nerves that you should know come out of the brachial plexus. So match these 5 nerves with your brachial plexus. Your axillary nerve, right, is axillary, we know, means under the arm. So that's the sensory area that's going to supply. And whenever you have a sensory area supplied, you're going to have the muscles controlled by the same nerve that's around that sensory area. So what's muscle is around the kind of the armpit area? One that we probably should know here would be deltoid. Musculocutaneous runs down the arm, and it's not only is it sensory for the arm area, biceps brachii would be a good muscle to know that it controls. The median nerve, again, those be sensory around the area of the muscles that it innervates, but a lot of your flexor muscles in the forearm and the wrist and hand are controlled by the median nerve, as well as the ulnar nerve. A lot of flexor muscles in the forearm and hand and finger area. The radial nerve, many of your extensor muscles. So you don't have to be too specific here. These are all going to be sensory for kind of the skin around the muscle areas that it controls, but axillary deltoid, musculocutaneous biceps, median and ulnar flexor muscles, radial extensor muscles. You can kind of keep it simple like that. Yeah, in lab we'll label these nerves that we're going through, but just to show you here, there's the axillary nerve that actually goes under the arm. It's in green, comes out the other side where the deltoid muscle is. The musculocutaneous is going to travel right on top of the humerus here, which is where your biceps brachii muscle is. And then if you look at the forearm, well, then we have a radial nerve on the radial side, the thumb side, a median nerve in the middle, and then an ulnar nerve on the medial side of the forearm. 2 good muscles to know for the lumbar plexus. Not muscles, sorry. 2 good nerves from the lumbar plexus that we should know is the femoral and the obturator nerve. Femoral nerve, think of this nerve being right on top of the femur where your quadriceps are, so your quadriceps would be your good muscle to pair with femoral nerve. Obturator nerve is called that because it goes through the obturator foramen, which we labeled in the skeleton. to your adductor muscles, which would be the inside or the medial portion of your thigh. And we'll see a picture on the next page. All right, so there's femoral, right where your quadricep muscles are. There's your obturator nerve going through the obturator foramen to the medial thigh to control your adductor muscles. So those are your two main nerves that are part or that arise from your lumbar plexus. Now we're left with the sacral plexus, and there's really one major nerve. There's quite a few nerves, but one major nerve that will come out of the sacral plexus, and that's called the sciatic nerve. And it's going to take care of the rest of the lower extremity that's not supplied by the femoral nerve. Remember, femoral, we had quadriceps and adductors, the front of the thigh and the medial thigh. Well, the rest of the thigh and everything below the knee is going to be supplied by the sciatic nerve. It's the longest, thickest nerve in the body, belongs to the sacral plexus. The sciatic nerve is going to branch once it crosses the knee into the tibial region and the common fibular region. So let's go to a picture. Here's the sacral plexus, which uses S1 through S4, also some lumbar ventral rami. Even though there's L4 and L5, it's still called the sacral plexus, and you can see most of these nerves from this plexus right here. These two large ones come together, right? This whole thing, this pair of nerves here is called the sciatic nerve. And that sciatic nerve is actually going to split into those two regions below the knee or distal to the knee into the tibial and common fibular nerve. But for right here, this is just a good picture of the sacral plexus and this major sciatic nerve that comes from it. All right, so this large sciatic nerve runs down the leg, mainly the back of the leg, right, supplying the hamstrings and muscles on the lateral side of the thigh as well. And then when it gets to the knee, it's going to split into the tibial nerve, which kind of takes care of the posterior lower leg, right? It's right behind the tibia here. And then this other branch goes around to the front. It's called the common fibular nerve, which is going to split into superficial and deep, but that's fine. There's your sciatic nerve. And we're going to end the chapter here with dermatomes and a law, but a dermatome, that is just an area of your skin that's innervated, which means it has nerve supply, by a cutaneous branch, which means a skin branch of a single spinal nerve. So there's 31 pairs of spinal nerve. They're all mixed nerves, so this is just talking about the sensory portion of that spinal nerve. I'm going to explain kind of the rest of the information on the dermatome on the picture on the next slide. This is a dermatome map of your 31 spinal nerves, the sensory portion of your spinal nerves, and you can see that all the skin, right, is supplied by those 31 spinal nerves. For example, if you feel some pressure or touch or pain or temperature on your thumb, well, it's using the C6 spinal or nerve root, the ventral rami from spinal nerve C6, right? If you're talking about your knee, well, that would be L4. So this is just a dermatome map, which ventral rami, which spinal nerve is being used for all of these sensations, right, on our skin. One thing to know here is what's missing. This is the posterior side of the body. You can see is all dermatomes. On the anterior side of the body, there's no dermatome for the face, but we do have sensation on our face. And the key here is that dermatomes represent spinal nerves. You might recall when we did cranial nerves, that cranial nerve 5, which was the trigeminal nerve, was a mixed nerve. It was sensory for the face, motor for some muscles of mastication, but since it was sensory for the face, well, this is a cranial nerve 5. So you might want to put a V there for cranial nerve 5, controls the face, right? But sensory for the face, I should say. But all the other parts of the body, sensory portions, are spinal nerves, and this dermatome map outlines them. So we went through the nerve plexuses, the 4 plexuses, and you should know the nerves, the major nerves that we went through that come from each of the 4 plexuses. For example, phrenic comes from the cervical plexus. Brachial plexus, we had 5. Axillary, musculocutaneous, median, radial, and ulnar nerves, right? Lumbar, we have 2 major nerves, which are the femoral and obturator nerve. The sacral plexus, major one, was the sciatic nerve, which splits into two. And then we saw the dermatomes, the areas of the skin supplied by a single spinal nerve. Well, here's Hilton's law. It just says any nerve serving a muscle. For example, the musculocutaneous nerve served the biceps brachii, right? Or the axillary nerve served the deltoid muscle. So any nerve serving a muscle that produces a movement at a joint also innervates joint and the skin over the joint, right? So for example, let's just take the axillary nerve. It controls the deltoid muscle. Well, deltoid muscle acts on the shoulder, so the skin all around the shoulder is also supplied by that axillary nerve. So that's just Hilton's law, just connecting the motor portion to the sensory portion of our peripheral nerves. So that's the part 2 of this chapter. A little easier than part 1. Part 1 had a ton of information of the central nervous system. Main thing for part 2 of chapter 13 is know your cranial nerves, name, number, and function. Function meaning sensory, motor, or mixed. And for what? If it's motor, motor for what? If it's mixed, motor for what and sensory for what? And then we went through the spinal nerves, their branches, and then the plexuses and the nerves that come from each plexus.